I definitely think there's a technical precision to the way...
Surgical.
Surgical, yeah, it is surgical. And I think the scene in this film where they come for Rachel in her home is really, even reading it, I got...
There's two scenes, this one and the lab.
Yeah, the lab, of course, I don't want to give away too much. The lab is one of the most terrifying scenes imaginable.
Especially yesterday,
But somehow, when I read the script, the scene where they come for her in her home was the one that really reminded me of that scene in Michael Clayton, which I also thought was amazing.
Brilliant.
But, you know, it's funny because that really creepy surgical precision about these actual actions, to me, is like is paralleled by the creepiness that I think runs through Tony's films in a thematic way, because he, in addition to what you're observing, I think a lot of what's in Michael Clayton in terms of exploring this idea that the real villain is the corporation, that the real villain is the system that compromises people's ethics so much that they find themselves, you know, trapped and in some ways degraded. And I think that there's a fear running through Tony's films of oppression, you know, of like almost the way that we are in danger of being oppressed. And I think, and I love that. It's one of the things I really appreciate that he's been doing. Just because you're drawing the parallel, like in Michael Clayton, I think the most beautiful piece of writing in that to me is the message that Tom Wilkinson leaves on the phone, where he talks about what has happened to me. He says, you know, this is what has happened to my soul, and I've come to realize that I have got to change, you know, and speak the truth. And in this one, you know, when I was going through it, there's a scene where my character talks to Jeremy Renner, where Jeremy is having a crisis of conscience and of the spirit, and the talk that my character gives to him, where he rationalizes essentially the necessity of bad action sometimes, or of doing bad things, it really kind of, you know, it disturbed me. So I thought this is a really, and I think that's Tony's strength. I think he makes really exciting films, but they're very thoughtful. They have real ideas in them. I think it's wonderful because the result of all those things you're talking about is that most of Tony's characters aren't really good or bad. They're very shaded and very contradictory characters. Even, you know, Jeremy's character, he's the one who's trying to fight for his survival, but by no means is he an innocent. You know, he's a willing participant in a. He wants the pills. He wants the enhancement. He doesn't want to go back to the way he was. So he's complicit in this, and at the same time, my character, he's very tough and doing very harsh things, but he's not enjoying those things. He sees this as an unfortunate and negative outcome. So it's kind of great as an actor, because you're not playing sort of a cartoonish character. You're playing people who are having dilemmas, and that's the most interesting. I think the hesitations that you have that I do want things to be the best version of themselves, but Tony gave me a lot of faith. I felt I was surprised that he was going to do it again, but then that made me interested in it. Francis Coppola said that the best thing about movies is that they're collaborative, and the worst thing is that they're collaborative, like, which I always think is funny. But these things, I mean, these first three films, you know, it was Doug Liman and Paul Greengrass and Matt and Tony and Danny, and it, you know, that's what's wonderful. These things are put together by a lot of people, and when everybody's good, they turn out great. And I think Tony's, you know, the thread that continues in it all, and I think it turns out he's a great director as well, and and he's pulled together new cast that's hopefully strong also. And I think I really do. I guess I do feel confident that people who have appreciated the quality of this series will feel that this is very consistent, that it feels like the next chapter in something that they're very familiar with. I will say that last year I did these 2 films, and it was pure pleasure. It was really fun because I feel, even though their films couldn't be more different, I feel very similarly about Wes and Tony, which is that they're both writer-directors who have a great sensibility and whose work I really like. And that's, for me, that's just a great year. I'm very happy to work with people like that whose films I'm such a fan of, you know? In addition to the cast, the other addition on this one that I think is really exceptional is Robert Elswit, because Bob really is, in my view, one of the top film cinematographers in our era. He's shot some of the most beautiful and distinctive films in the last 20 years, and I think that excited me because I thought there's going to be an aesthetic on this that's going to be just impeccable, and I think he and Tony did a beautiful job on that as well. But I think it's different. I think it's a little bit different. Some of the style is familiar from the other films, but actually, you know, I have to say, I love the films, I don't think the Bourne films invented the style, because I think, you know, if you look at Fincher's film Seven, or you look at, Tony Scott and Ridley Scott's movies, there's a Tony
Yeah.
especially, I think there's a, anyway, it's all fun and it has great people involved.